He told her to leave. She left. And she took with her the one secret that would bring the most feared man in America to his knees: his daughter. Vincent Calloway had built an empire on blood and silence, but it was a single forgotten envelope, a tiny bracelet, and 4 words scrawled in his wife's handwriting that finally broke him. Drop your city in the comments right now. I want to see how far this story travels. Hit that like button, follow for part 2, and do not move, because what happened next will destroy you. The envelope had been sitting at the bottom of his desk drawer for 11 days. Vincent Calloway didn't find it on purpose. He was looking for the Mercer contracts, the stack of papers his attorney had delivered the previous Tuesday, the ones that would finalize the alliance between the Calloway organization and the Vega family out of Philadelphia. A clean political arrangement. 2 crime dynasties bound together through paperwork and handshakes, and a marriage that meant nothing to either party involved, least of all to the woman being traded like a deed of property. He found the envelope wedged beneath a silver letter opener he'd never once used, beneath a folded copy of the New York Post from 3 weeks ago, beneath the ordinary debris of a man who had stopped paying attention to his own life somewhere between the 3rd and 4th year of his marriage. It was a standard white envelope, no return address, his name written across the front in Charlotte's handwriting. That particular slant she gave to the capital C, like she was always leaning away from something. He almost put it back. Instead, he stood there in the blue-gray light of his study at 11:43 in the evening, with the Atlantic wind hammering the windows of Blackwood Estate, and he tore it open. Inside, a bracelet, tiny, pale pink beads threaded on a thin elastic cord, the kind they put on newborns in the hospital to identify them, and a folded note card. 7 lines in Charlotte's handwriting, each one careful and deliberate, the way she wrote when she was holding herself together by willpower alone. Vincent. By the time you find this, if you ever do, she'll already have her father's eyes. I named her Lily. She was born healthy. She has all 10 fingers and all 10 toes, and she makes a sound when she sleeps that you would have loved if you had stayed. I'm not writing this to punish you. I'm writing it because one day our daughter will ask why her father chose another woman instead of us. I want her to know I tried to give her the truth before she was old enough to ask for it. Charlotte. Vincent read it twice, then a 3rd time. Then he sat down on the edge of his desk with all 210 pounds of him, and he put his head in his hands, and he stayed like that for a long time, not moving, not calling anyone, just sitting in the wreckage of something he hadn't known he was destroying until it was already gone. He had met Charlotte Hayes at a charity function in Manhattan 7 years ago. She was there with a hospital board she volunteered for, something involving pediatric care, he remembered, though he hadn't cared about the particulars at the time. He'd cared about the way she stood apart from everyone else in the room. Not shy, just separate. Like she had decided somewhere around age 12 that most social gatherings were elaborate performances, and she didn't particularly feel like auditioning. She was the daughter of a federal judge from Connecticut. She had a graduate degree in public health that she'd never fully used. She read novels the way other people watched television. Fast, hungry, with complete attention. She could hold an argument for an hour without raising her voice, which Vincent found both attractive and maddening in equal measure. Their marriage was, to the outside world, a love story. Vinnie Calloway and the judge's daughter. The crime boss who somehow landed a woman with a conscience. People said it at dinner parties. They said it at the Calloway organization's quarterly meetings too, though with less sentimentality and more calculation. Charlotte Hayes was good optics. She was a wall between Vincent and several law enforcement agencies that had been watching him for the better part of a decade. But that wasn't the whole truth. The truth was more complicated, and Vincent had never been good at complicated. He had loved her. He was certain of that now, sitting in his study with her note card in his hand. He had loved her the way men like him loved things. Badly, insufficiently, without ever making it clearly known until the thing was gone. He'd loved her by not hitting her, by keeping the ugliest parts of his work away from their dinner table, by buying her the house on Nantucket she'd mentioned exactly once in passing. He thought those were the right languages. He'd been wrong. The Vega alliance had been Nathan Cole's idea. Nathan had been Vincent's consigliere for 19 years, and Nathan was rarely wrong about business. The Vega family controlled ports in Delaware and New Jersey. They had judges in their pocket from Pennsylvania down to Maryland. An alliance would double the Calloway operation's reach overnight. The only currency the Vegas would accept was a marriage. their eldest son, Marco Vega, and someone from the Callaway inner circle who had enough social standing to make the union mean something. Vincent had told Charlotte in April. She'd been sitting at the kitchen table with her coffee going cold, reading something on her laptop, and he'd stood in the doorway of their kitchen in his own house and told his wife of 4 years that he needed her to leave so he could give another woman her place. He'd framed it as a business necessity. He'd been calm about it. He told her he'd ensure she was financially secure. He'd said it like he was renegotiating a contract, which was, he understood now, the single worst thing he had ever done to another person. She hadn't yelled. Charlotte never yelled. She'd looked at him for a long time. Long enough that he'd started to feel something move through him that he didn't have a name for. Then she'd closed her laptop, carried her coffee mug to the sink, rinsed it out, set it in the drying rack, and said very quietly, "All right, Vincent, if that's what the Empire needs." 3 days later, she was gone. He hadn't known she was pregnant, or rather, he hadn't let himself know. There had been signs. He understood that now, the particular way she'd moved through the house those last weeks, the vitamin bottles on the bathroom counter, the way she'd pressed her hand flat against her abdomen sometimes when she thought he wasn't watching. He'd seen all of it and filed it away in the same place he filed everything he didn't want to deal with, deep, inaccessible. Behind the wall he'd been building since he was 19 years old and watched his father take a bullet in a South Boston parking garage. He told himself she was fine. She was Charlotte. Charlotte was always fine. She was also, apparently, raising his daughter alone in a city he hadn't yet identified, in a life he'd had no part in building, in a world where his name was either irrelevant or a threat. Vincent set the note card on the desk. He looked at the bracelet for a while. Then he picked up his phone and called Nathan. Nathan Cole arrived at Blackwood Estate at 12:30 in the morning, which was not unusual. Nathan had been arriving at odd hours for 2 decades. He was 61 years old, built like a retired boxer gone soft at the middle, with silver hair he kept short and eyes that missed very little. He'd served Vincent's father before he'd served Vincent. He was the closest thing to a conscience the Callaway organization had ever possessed, which said something unsettling about the organization. Vincent didn't say anything when Nathan walked into the study. He just pushed the note card across the desk. Nathan read it standing up. He read it again. Then he set it down and said nothing for a moment, which was also not unusual. Nathan thought before he spoke. It was one of approximately 4 things Vincent genuinely respected about him. "How long ago?" Nathan said. "The postmark on the envelope is 8 months old." Nathan's expression didn't change, but something moved behind his eyes. She was already gone when she sent this. She sent it before she delivered. She knew she was pregnant when she left. Vincent's voice was flat. He'd been flattening it for the past 40 minutes, ever since he'd put his head in his hands and allowed himself exactly 1 full minute of something that wasn't flatness before locking it back down. "I want her found, Nathan. I want every available resource on this." "Vincent, I'm not asking for your opinion." "I know you're not." Nathan pulled the chair across from the desk and sat. "I'm going to give it anyway because that's why you pay me. You walk into this wrong and you lose everything. The woman spent 8 months making herself invisible. She's not hiding from the world. She's hiding from you specifically. You send a team of soldiers to drag her back. I'm not dragging anyone anywhere. You send anyone with a gun and a connection to this organization within 10 feet of Charlotte and that child, and she will call her father, who is a federal judge with a specific and documented interest in your operation, and you will have a problem that no alliance with the Vega family will ever fix." Vincent looked at him for a long time. "So what do you suggest?" "I suggest," Nathan said carefully, "that you find her first, quietly, professionally. And that when you do, you go alone. Alone. Without soldiers, without security, without the organization anywhere near it." Nathan stood. "She left because of what you are. If you show up as what you are, you'll lose her again. And this time, you'll lose the child too." Vincent didn't answer immediately. He looked at the bracelet sitting on the edge of the desk. Pink beads on a thin cord. Hospital issue. The kind of thing that costs nothing and means everything. "Find her," he said. "What?" The search took 11 weeks. Charlotte had been thorough in a way that suggested she'd planned it before she'd left, or possibly before she'd even told him she was pregnant, which was a thought Vincent didn't spend too much time with because it led to places he wasn't ready to go. She'd closed her bank accounts 3 weeks before she disappeared. She'd transferred to a different health insurance network under her maiden name. Her phone, when they eventually traced the number, had been active for exactly 6 days after she left Blackwood Estate before going permanently dark. She'd bought a prepaid replacement with cash. The car she'd driven away from the estate, a silver Audi he'd bought her 2 Christmases ago, had been sold to a private dealer in Hartford for cash, title transferred cleanly, no forwarding address. She had cut every thread. Vincent's investigator, a former NYPD detective named Ray Suarez, who now worked exclusively for the Callaway organization, told him this during their 3rd weekly debrief with the particular tone of professional admiration that men use when they are impressed by something that's actively inconveniencing them. She knew how investigations work, Ray said. She anticipated the digital trace. She moved through cash only as early as possible. If she has anyone helping her, they're equally careful. She does, Vincent said. Emma Brooks, Charlotte's best friend from college, an ER nurse in the Boston area. Vincent had met her exactly twice, once at a charity event, once at a dinner party at Blackwood, and both times she'd looked at him the way people look at something they've assessed and found wanting. He'd dismissed her at the time. He was less inclined to dismiss her now. Brooks hasn't moved, Ray confirmed. Still at the same address in Somerville she's had for 3 years. Works the same shifts at Mass General. We've had surveillance on her for 6 weeks. She's not leading you to Charlotte. No. She's careful too. She doesn't go anywhere unusual on her days off. She does her grocery shopping. She visits her sister in Newton twice a month. She goes to a coffee shop on Beacon Hill on Sunday mornings. Ray paused. But she pays for everything in cash, has been for the past 4 months. Vincent leaned back in his chair. She's delivering things. That's my read. She's the supply line. Charlotte and the baby get what they need, but Brooks cycles through enough different stores, different routes, that there's no single location you can anchor to. So we anchor to Brooks. We're already on it. 3 weeks later, Ray called at 7 in the morning with an address in the South End neighborhood of Boston. A walk-up apartment building on a quiet street lined with brownstones. 2nd floor, Unit 2C. Lease under a name that wasn't Charlotte's. A name that turned out to belong to Emma Brooks's college roommate, a woman who was currently living in Portland, Oregon, and who had, according to Ray, no idea her identity was being used. Vincent drove to Boston himself. No security detail, no soldiers. Just him and a black sedan he'd borrowed from a contact at a rental agency that didn't ask questions, driving north on I-95 at 6 in the morning with Charlotte's note card in the inside pocket of his jacket and the small bracelet on the passenger seat. He sat outside the building for 2 hours before he went in. He'd intended to knock. That had been the plan, such as it was. Go to the door, knock. Stand in the hallway without a weapon, without backup, without any of the armor he'd been wearing for 38 years, and face whatever Charlotte decided to do when she opened the door and found him on the other side of it. What happened instead was that he was standing in the lobby of the building, having let himself in through a side entrance that a departing resident had held open without a second glance, when he heard a sound from above him that stopped him cold on the staircase. A baby crying. High and clear and indistinct from any other baby crying, and yet somehow immediately different from anything he had ever heard in his life. He stood on the 2nd floor landing and listened to it for a full 10 seconds, his hand on the railing, the blood moving strangely through him before he made himself keep climbing. He found apartment 2C at the end of the hallway. He raised his hand to knock. The door opened before he could. Charlotte stood in the doorway holding a baby against her shoulder. Lily, 7 months old, who was in the process of making the transition from crying to not crying, that jagged series of hitching breaths that means the worst of it is over. Charlotte was in a gray sweatshirt and jeans, her hair pulled up in a way that suggested she'd done it fast and without a mirror, and she was patting the baby's back in the automatic way of someone who has been doing it long enough that the motion has become part of her body's default vocabulary. She looked at Vincent. He looked at her. Lily made a soft sound against Charlotte's shoulder and grabbed a fistful of the sweatshirt's collar and held on. "How did you find me?" Charlotte said. Not a question. Flat. "Ray Suarez." "Of course." She stepped back from the door slightly, not to let him in, just to create more space between them. Her eyes moved over him in the way they always had, fast and comprehensive, reading something he could never quite track. "You have no right to be here." "I know." "Then why are you here?" He pulled the note card from his jacket pocket, held it up. Charlotte looked at it for a moment. Something moved through her face, not softness, something more complicated than that, more weathered. "I sent that 8 months ago. I wasn't sure you'd even find it. I almost didn't. You should have left it where it was." "Charlotte," his voice came out rougher than he'd intended. "She's mine." "She's mine," Charlotte said, and her voice didn't rise at all, which was worse than if it had. "I carried her for 9 months. I delivered her in a hospital with Emma in the room because there was no one else. I brought her home to an apartment I pay for with the money I earned as a public health consultant, working 40 hours a week remotely, and I have been with her every single day since. So yes, Vincent, biologically she is half yours. In every way that counts, she is entirely mine. And I need you to think very carefully about what you plan to do with that information before you say another word." Vincent stood in the hallway. He was aware of how large he was relative to the narrow space, the way he took up room by default, the way his presence changed the physics of any room he entered. He was aware that he had shown up at this door representing everything Charlotte had walked away from. He was aware that he had nothing to offer except the fact of his arrival, which was a very small thing compared to everything he had taken. "I don't want to take her from you," he said. "I don't want to take anything. I just—" He stopped. Started again. "She was born. She exists. She's 7 months old and I've missed every day of it, and I can't—" He stopped again. His jaw was tight. He was not a man who cried, and he was not going to start now, but something in him was straining at something, and he needed it to stop. "I just want to see her." Charlotte looked at him for a long time. Lily had quieted completely, her eyes half closed, her fist still knotted in the fabric at Charlotte's collar. The baby's face was turned toward Vincent without any particular intent. Just the randomness of a 7-month-old's attention landing on a new thing in her field of vision. She had his eyes, dark gray, with something in the irises that caught the light differently, depending on the angle. Charlotte had said so in the letter. She'll already have her father's eyes. He hadn't understood what that would mean when he read it. He understood now. "You can come in," Charlotte said. Her voice was very quiet and very careful. "For an hour. And then you're going to go back to New York, and we're going to figure out what happens next with lawyers and with boundaries and without anyone from your organization anywhere near this building. Do you understand me?" "Yes." "Take off your jacket." He looked at her. "I know you're carrying," she said. "Take off the jacket and leave it in the hallway." He took off the jacket. He left it in the hallway. He walked into Charlotte's apartment and she closed the door behind him, and the place was small and warm and smelled like coffee and baby powder and the faint particular scent of a life being built from scratch, careful and deliberate, and his. He sat on the edge of her couch, the same couch she'd apparently hauled up here from God knows where, covered in a gray throw blanket that had seen better days. Charlotte stood across from him with Lily still against her shoulder, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Then Lily turned her head and looked directly at Vincent with those gray eyes. Vincent looked back. "Hi," he said, quietly. The way you say a word when you're aware that words are insufficient, but you have nothing else. Lily blinked. Then she made a sound, a soft, burbling, entirely unconcerned sound, and grabbed again at Charlotte's collar. Charlotte watched him. Her expression was unreadable. She held the baby with the practiced ease of someone who has learned a new language in the course of 7 months, a language called this child, and she did not move to bring Lily any closer to him or any farther away. "She doesn't know who you are," Charlotte said. "I know." "You understand what that means?" "Yes." He kept his eyes on the baby, on the particular gray of her irises, on the small curve of her jaw, on the way her fingers worked at Charlotte's collar with complete unconscious purpose. "I understand." The hour passed. He didn't say much. Neither did Charlotte. There was too much accumulated silence between them for speech to do much work yet. The kind of silence that builds over months and years and bad decisions and missed chances. The kind that requires more than an afternoon to excavate. When the hour was up, Charlotte stood and said his name once, and he stood, and he picked his jacket up from the hallway, and he went downstairs and sat in the borrowed sedan on the quiet brownstone street in the November afternoon, and he put his hands on the steering wheel and he left them there. He drove back to New York. He called Nathan from the highway. "I found them." "I know. Ray told me." "She's—" He stopped, breathed. "She's healthy. The baby is healthy." "That's good news." "Someone needs to tell me why there was a photograph of Charlotte's building in the package that arrived at Blackwood yesterday." Silence on the line. Then carefully, "What package?" "The one sitting on the front steps when I left this morning. Addressed to me. Unmarked. I left it with Marcus. He should have called you." "He didn't. I'm calling him now." Nathan's voice had shifted into the register it went to when something was wrong. Vincent knew that register well. He'd heard it before operations went sideways, before people died. A photograph of her building. The whole building, taken from across the street, time-stamped 3 days ago. The silence was longer this time. "Vincent, someone else knows where she is." Vincent's hands tightened on the wheel. "Yes." "Which means they knew before we did." "Yes." "That's not a coincidence, and it's not a warning. That's someone telling you they have options you don't." Nathan paused. "Who knows about the child?" "No one. You, Ray, 2 of Ray's people." "Then the leak didn't come from inside." Another pause. "That means someone found her independently. Someone who's been watching Charlotte, not watching you." The highway unrolled in front of him, gray and flat. Bare trees on both sides, the sky coming down low and dark with the specific intent of November. Vincent thought about Charlotte in her apartment, about Lily's hand in the fabric of Charlotte's sweatshirt, about all the careful, invisible work Charlotte had done to disappear, and someone else's methodical work to find her. "Pull everything we have on Damian Mercer," he said. "You think it's Mercer?" "I think he's the only person with sufficient resources and sufficient motivation to run a parallel investigation." Vincent kept his voice level. "And I think if it's him, we're not dealing with a warning. We're dealing with the opening move. I'll have everything on your desk by morning." Nathan paused one more time, and when he spoke again, the careful professional distance in his voice had thinned slightly, enough to let something else through, something closer to actual human concern. "Vincent, get back here fast." Vincent said nothing. He pushed the sedan to 95 and watched the road. He was back at Blackwood by 8. Marcus was waiting in the entry hall with the package. It had been swept for anything dangerous and cleared. Just the photograph. Just the building where Charlotte and Lily were sleeping right now, at this moment, unaware. Vincent stood in his study and looked at the photograph for a long time. It was taken from across the street, probably from a car, with a telephoto lens. The building was sharp and clear. The time stamp in the corner, November 14th, 3 days ago. In the lower left corner of the image, barely visible, the edge of a figure stepping out of the building's side entrance. Gray sweatshirt, dark hair pulled up. Charlotte. With Lily strapped against her chest in a baby carrier, heading out for what was probably a morning walk. Someone had been close enough to photograph them 3 days ago. Vincent turned the photograph over. On the back, in a clean, typed font, 4 words. "You're already too late." He set the photo down. He went to the window. Rain was starting outside, tapping at the glass with the irregular patience of something that intends to continue for a long time. He thought about Damian Mercer. 44 years old, 3rd-generation crime syndicate built on extortion, trafficking, and the kind of financial manipulation that had kept half a dozen federal investigators busy for years without ever quite getting close enough for an arrest. The Mercer organization had been circling the Callaway territories for the better part of 2 years. Not openly, not with direct confrontation, but with the incremental, methodical pressure of something that moves in low light. Mercer had reached out through intermediaries twice in the past 18 months. Both times Vincent had declined to engage. Both times Mercer had absorbed the refusal without visible response. That was the thing about Damian Mercer that made him dangerous in a way most people weren't. He didn't react to rejection. He cataloged it. He stored it in whatever internal ledger he kept of advantages and leverage and waited for the moment when the information became useful. And now he had Charlotte. He had Lily. He had a photograph and 4 words, and the clear, unmistakable communication that he had found a pressure point that no territory dispute and no power negotiation had ever found before. Vincent turned from the window. He sat at his desk. He opened his laptop. He pulled up the contact for Charlotte's number, the new one, the prepaid, which he'd gotten from Ray's file. He started a message, deleted it, started again. Charlotte, someone else found you. I need you to know. Do not open your door for anyone you don't recognize. Do not go outside tomorrow. I am handling this, but I need you to be careful right now. He stared at it for a moment. Then he sent it. The 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Then they disappeared. Then they appeared again. Her response came 4 minutes later. Who? He typed back, I don't know yet. I will. Another long pause, then, how long have they known? At least 3 days. Maybe longer. A pause. He could feel her processing it from 200 miles away. The particular way she absorbed information she didn't want to have. That careful, controlled stillness she used when the ground shifted under her and she refused to let it show. What do I do? Stay inside. I'm sending someone to watch the building. Not soldiers, Ray. You know Ray is safe. I don't know anything about what's safe from your world, Vincent. I know. He stared at the screen. Charlotte. I'm sorry. The dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then nothing. No response. He put the phone face down on the desk and opened the Mercer file Nathan had sent over. 40 pages of surveillance reports and financial records and the accumulated intelligence of 2 years of careful watching. By midnight, he had worked through 30 of the 40 pages, and he had a clear and uncomfortable picture of Damian Mercer, not just as an adversary, but as a strategist. A man who understood that the most effective weapon against any empire was not a direct attack on its walls, but a quiet siege of everything the empire was built to protect. Vincent set the file down at 12:30. He looked at the bracelet still sitting on the edge of his desk. Pink beads. Hospital issue. He was going back to Boston in the morning. Back. He arrived before dawn. He'd called Ray from the highway, and Ray had already been in position for 2 hours by the time Vincent pulled up, parked half a block from the brownstone, angled for a clear view of both the front entrance and the side alley, with a partner in a second vehicle covering the back. Ray had been doing this for a long time. He did not require instruction. Vincent parked and walked to Ray's car and got in the passenger seat without preamble. Anything, he said. Quiet night. One vehicle I haven't been able to place. Dark blue panel van, Massachusetts plates, parked on the cross street since 11. Could be nothing. Hasn't moved. Plates. Ray handed him a slip of paper. Vincent photographed it and sent it to Marcus back at Blackwood with 3 words. Run this now. She know you're here? Ray asked. I texted her an hour ago. Ray nodded. He looked at the building. She's careful, your wife. She's not my wife. A pause. She's the mother of your kid. Yes. Ray absorbed this without further comment, which was one of the reasons Vincent had employed him for 11 years. Marcus came back with the plates in 6 minutes. The van was registered to a maintenance company based in Worcester. The company had been incorporated 14 months ago. Its registered agent was a name that appeared nowhere in Vincent's existing files. But when Nathan ran it through their secondary network 40 minutes later, it connected to a shell entity that connected to another shell entity that connected, eventually, to a holding company registered in Delaware that had done business with the Mercer organization twice in the past 3 years. Vincent read the chain of connections on his phone. Sitting in Ray's car as the sky began to go gray at the edges, the building in front of him quiet and dark. It's Mercer, he said. You're sure? Sure enough. He opened the car door. I'm going up. Vincent. He was already on the sidewalk. He buzzed Charlotte's apartment from the lobby. She answered immediately. She hadn't been sleeping. He could hear it in the single syllable of her voice. It's me, he said. A pause. The door buzzed open. He took the stairs 2 at a time. He knocked on 2C. The door opened and Charlotte was standing there again, this time in the pre-dawn dark of her apartment with Lily on her hip, wide awake, the baby's eyes moving between her mother and the large, unfamiliar man in the doorway with a kind of focused, unconcerned attention. What's happening? Charlotte said. The van on the cross street. It's connected to someone named Damian Mercer. He watched her face. Have you heard that name? No. You're going to. He stepped inside and she moved to let him, and he went to the window. the one facing the street, and looked down at the angle of the cross street without getting too close to the glass. The van was still there. Dark. Still. Mercer is a competitor of mine. He's been looking for leverage on the Callaway operation for 2 years. He's found it. Charlotte stood behind him with the baby against her hip. We're his leverage. Yes. She was quiet for a moment. He could hear her breathing, controlled, deliberate. How bad is this? Vincent turned from the window. He looked at her. He looked at Lily, who was looking back at him with those gray eyes that were also his gray eyes, taking him in with the pure empirical interest of someone who has not yet learned to be afraid. I'm going to get you out of this building, he said. Today. I have a house in Connecticut. It's clean, it's secure, it's nowhere in any file Mercer has access to. I need you to pack what you need for a week. And then what? And then we figure out what Mercer wants and how to take his leverage away. And if I say no, Charlotte said, her voice was level. If I say I'll take Lily somewhere else, somewhere you don't know about either, and I'll handle this myself? Vincent looked at her. He thought about the photograph on the back of his desk. You're already too late. Then Mercer uses you as a weapon against me anyway, he said. Except this time without anyone between you and him. And Mercer doesn't send warnings twice, Charlotte. The photograph was the first move. He's telling me what he has. The second move is using it. Charlotte held Lily a little tighter. Something moved across her face. Not fear, exactly. Something harder than fear. Something that looked like a woman doing a rapid and unsentimental calculation of exactly how many options she had left. 1 week, she said. 1 week. And you stay out of our way. You're there for security, not for anything else. Understood. She looked at him for another moment. Then she looked at Lily. Then she turned and went into the back of the apartment, and Vincent heard drawers opening, and he stood in the small, warm living room in the early gray morning and listened to the sounds of Charlotte packing, the sounds of Lily being settled into some kind of travel seat, the sounds of a life being uprooted for the second time, and he told himself this was going to be the last time. He was still telling himself that when his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. 4 words, identical to the message on the photograph. You're already too late. And then, before he could respond, the building's lights went out. All of them. Every floor. The lobby. The hallway. Complete darkness. And from somewhere below him, the ground floor, maybe the basement, a sound that was not the settling of a building or the ordinary noise of an old structure in an early morning. It was footsteps. Multiple sets. Moving fast and without hesitation in the dark below. Vincent had his gun out before the sound finished registering. He moved to Charlotte's bedroom door and pushed it open and found her standing with Lily held against her chest, frozen, her eyes wide. Not panicking, Charlotte didn't panic, but something in her was very still in the way things go still right before they break. Stay behind me, he said. The footsteps reached the second floor. The footsteps stopped. That was the thing that scared him more than the sound of them climbing. Moving men make noise. Men who stop in the dark and wait. Those are the ones who know what they're doing. Vincent stood in the doorway of Charlotte's bedroom with his gun up and his back to the wall and counted in his head. 2 sets on the stairs. Possibly a third further back, slower, more careful. Professional spacing. These weren't street-level muscle. These were people who had done this before in the dark, in tight spaces, against people who would shoot back. Charlotte was behind him with Lily pressed against her chest. The baby was awake and quiet in the specific way infants go quiet, when they sense the adults around them have stopped breathing normally. One sound from Lily, and whoever was in that hallway would know exactly which door to hit first. Vincent reached back with his free hand and found Charlotte's wrist. He squeezed once, firm, the universal language for don't move. She didn't. His phone was in his jacket pocket. He couldn't reach it without lowering the gun, and he wasn't lowering the gun. The hallway outside the apartment door was silent, dark. He could see nothing through the thin gap under the door except darkness. No light anywhere, which meant whoever had cut the power had done it to the whole building, or the whole block. Professional, planned. Then the door to the apartment across the hall, 2B, opened. Vincent heard it, the specific soft click of a handle turning slowly, the groan of old hinges being tested carefully from the wrong side. Someone had gotten into 2B first. Through the window, maybe. The fire escape on the south side of the building. He'd noted it when he came up. Old iron, ran past the second-floor windows, accessible from the alley. He moved before the thought was fully formed. He crossed Charlotte's living room in 4 steps, reached the front door, and flipped the deadbolt. Then he went back to Charlotte and put his mouth close to her ear. "Bathroom," he said. "Lock the door. Get in the tub." "Vincent, the tub. Now." "She stays quiet. You stay down. You do not open that door for anyone except me." Charlotte looked at him for exactly 1 second. In that second, he saw a dozen things cross her face. Fury, fear, the specific look of a woman who has been making her own decisions for 8 months and does not appreciate being issued orders by the person who made all of this necessary in the first place. Then she looked at Lily, and the calculation was done. She went. The bathroom door clicked shut. He heard the lock engage. He went back to the front door. The hallway was still quiet. He put his back to the wall beside the door, not in front of it. Front of the door was where you stood if you wanted to take the first burst of whatever came through the wood. He'd learned that at 22 years old in a different city, in a different building, and he'd never forgotten it. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He got it out one-handed without looking away from the door. Kept the gun up. A text from Ray. 2 inside. "Fire escape 2B. I have the back. You have a problem." He typed back one-handed. "How long?" Ray. "I called it in. 4 minutes, maybe." 4 minutes. He heard it then, not from the front of the apartment, but from the window in the bedroom. The particular sound of a latch being worked from outside. Someone on the fire escape, trying the window. Vincent crossed the apartment and went into the bedroom, and the window was moving, the old latch vibrating in its frame, someone pushing up from outside with steady, patient pressure. He got behind the wall to the left of it and waited. The window came up. The man who came through it was large and wearing dark tactical gear, and he had a weapon in his right hand, and he never got it raised because Vincent hit him across the forearm with the butt of his own gun, hard enough to feel the bone move under the impact. And the man went down onto the bedroom floor with a sound that was mostly breath leaving a body all at once. Vincent got the man's weapon, a suppressed 9mm, professional equipment, not the kind of thing you buy at a gun show, and checked the window. The fire escape was empty. One more man could come up behind, but not immediately. He went back to the living room, pressed himself against the wall beside the front door. The knock, when it came, was quiet. 2 taps, very deliberate, and then a voice, low, controlled, American accent, the kind of accent that comes from nowhere in particular. "Mr. Calloway, we're not here for you." Vincent said nothing. "We don't want a firefight. We want the woman and the child. You walk away and this is clean. You stay and it gets complicated for everyone." Vincent breathed through his nose, kept his voice level. "Who sent you?" A pause. "You already know. I want to hear you say it." Another pause. "Mr. Mercer sends his regards. And a message. He says the alliance you refused 18 months ago is still available. He's willing to discuss terms. He thinks you'll find them more reasonable now that you understand what's at stake." "Tell Mercer," Vincent said, "that I'm going to find him." "Mr. Calloway, tell him I'm going to find him before he finds another approach to this situation. Tell him I know his structure. I know his shell companies. I know the 3 federal investigations he's currently managing, and the specific prosecutor in the Southern District who would like very much to talk to me about what I know. Tell him those conversations become very easy for me to have if anything happens to my family." Silence from the hallway. "Tell him," Vincent said, "that this was his one move. He doesn't get another one." More silence. Then the sound of footsteps. 2 sets moving away, fast, toward the stairwell. Then Ray's voice from outside, a shout, and 2 sharp sounds that were suppressed gunshots from the alley below, and then nothing. Vincent held his position for 30 seconds. Then he went to the bathroom door and knocked 3 times. "It's me." The lock clicked. The door opened. Charlotte was sitting on the edge of the tub with Lily in her lap, one hand over the baby's head, her back straight, her face very still. She looked up at him when he came in, and he could see in her eyes the thing she would not let into her voice, that she'd been terrified. "Over?" she said. "For now." She looked at him. "For now." "Yes." She looked down at Lily. Lily looked up at her with complete attention, both hands wrapped around Charlotte's thumb. Charlotte exhaled. Long, slow, controlled. I want to be very angry at you right now. You're allowed. I know I'm allowed. I'm always allowed. That's never been the question. She stood, shifting Lily to her hip in the practice motion of someone who has rearranged their entire center of gravity to accommodate another person. The question is whether being angry is useful, and right now, it isn't. Charlotte, is the car outside safe? Ray is outside. He'll tell me when it's clear. Then we wait. She brushed past him back into the living room, stepping around the thing on the bedroom floor without looking at it directly, and sat on her couch and pulled the gray blanket around herself and Lily with one arm. And with her free hand, she picked up the coffee mug from her end table, found it cold, and set it back down with the specific controlled disappointment of a woman who has run out of the kind of patience she keeps for small things. I need to call Emma, she said. Not yet. Her eyes came up. Emma doesn't know any of this is happening. I know. But if Mercer knows your address, he knows about Emma. Calling her now could put her in the middle of it. Charlotte looked at him. The expression on her face was the one she used when she was processing information that she disliked but could not argue with. You think he'd go after her? After. I think he's already building his options. Emma is one of them. Vincent sat in the chair across from her. Not close, not encroaching on whatever careful physical perimeter Charlotte had established around herself and the baby in the past 8 months. When this is over, you can call her. Right now, I need you to trust that I know how this particular type of person thinks. You mean because you are this particular type of person? The words landed flat and clean, the way Charlotte's words always did when she meant them, without ornamentation. Vincent didn't flinch. Yes. She looked at him for a long moment. Lily made a sound, not distress, just the ordinary vocalizing of a baby who is comfortable and awake, and Charlotte shifted automatically to accommodate it. This is your fault, Charlotte said. Not with heat, just with the particular flatness of a fact being stated. Not the immediate situation, the whole of it. Mercer wouldn't have a pressure point on you if you hadn't. I know. I'm not finished. Her voice didn't rise, but something in it sharpened. You built an empire on fear and debt and silence. You called it protection. You called it the organization. You called it doing what was necessary. And then when the price of all that necessary came due, the thing it cost was me and a child you didn't even know existed. She looked down at Lily. She's 7 months old. She is 7 months old, and there were men with weapons on a fire escape outside her window. Vincent said nothing. There was nothing to say. She was right on every count. I left to protect her, Charlotte said. I knew when I left that your world would eventually find a way to touch her. I thought distance was the answer. I thought if I disappeared well enough, if I was careful enough. She stopped, pressed her lips together. I was naive. You were protecting her. That was right. It wasn't enough. No. Ray knocked twice on the door in the pattern they'd established coming in. Vincent got up and went to it, confirmed through the old peephole that it was Ray standing alone in the empty hallway, and opened it. Ray stepped inside and looked at the state of the apartment, the overturned lamp near the bedroom, the man still on the floor, with the expression of a man checking items off an internal list. We have a window of maybe 40 minutes before Mercer sends another team or calls in something we can't manage with 2 people, he said. The van on the cross street is gone. They spooked when I took down the one in the alley. But Mercer has resources, and this was a probe. He wanted to see how you'd respond, not necessarily to take them in the first move. I know. Vincent turned to Charlotte. Are you packed? Most of it. She was already standing, Lily on her hip. 5 minutes. She went into the bedroom. Vincent heard her stepping around the man on the floor, the sounds of the go bag she'd apparently half-packed before he'd arrived, the systematic, efficient movements of someone who has learned to move fast without panic. 5 minutes, she'd said. It was 4.5. She came out with a large duffel bag and Lily strapped into a carrier against her chest, the baby's face turned outward, looking at the room. Charlotte handed the duffel to Ray without a word and went to the kitchen counter and picked up a small framed photograph. The only one visible in the apartment, a picture of Charlotte and Emma at what looked like a beach, both of them laughing at something out of frame. She tucked it into the outside pocket of the duffel. Let's go, she said. The Connecticut house was 40 minutes outside Hartford. Vincent had bought it through a clean LLC 6 years ago and had never used it for organization business, one of the few places in his life that existed entirely outside the network. A gray salt box on a dirt road off a county highway, 2 acres of woods on 3 sides and an open field to the south. No neighbors within a quarter-mile. Invisible from the road. Charlotte walked through it without comment. She was doing the assessment he recognized from the years when she'd occasionally accompanied him to properties he was considering. Quiet, systematic, her eyes moving over exits and angles and the particular quality of the light through windows. She'd done it unconsciously, even before she'd known what kind of man she'd married. He'd always thought it was an odd habit. He understood now that it was something else. She put Lily down in the center of the living room floor with a folded blanket beneath her, and several of the soft toys from the duffel arranged within reach, and she stood and looked at Vincent. "Where does Nathan fit in this?" she said. He'd expected the question eventually, not this fast. "Nathan is my consigliere." "I know what he is. I'm asking where he fits in the specific situation of Damian Mercer knowing where I was." Vincent looked at her. "What are you asking?" "I'm asking who had access to the investigation, to Ray's findings, to the address." She held his gaze. "Because Mercer found me independently. You said so yourself, but someone in your circle knew you had found me, and 2 days later those men were on that fire escape." "You're suggesting a leak." "I'm suggesting a possibility. I'm not accusing anyone." She crossed her arms. "I'm also not accusing anyone. I've had 8 months to think about what your organization looks like from the outside. It looks like a machine that runs on information and fear, and those are the two things that leak most easily." Vincent said nothing for a moment. He turned it over. The photograph at Blackwood had arrived the morning after he'd first gone to Boston. The timing. Ray had been the only person with the address, Ray and Nathan. "Nathan has been with my family for 20 years, he said. And even as he said it, he heard how it sounded. How it was exactly the kind of thing you say about the person you're wrong about. "I know," Charlotte said. And she said it with a gentleness that was worse than argument, because the gentleness meant she wasn't trying to convince him of anything. She was just observing. He pulled out his phone. He looked at the call log. Nathan, Ray, Marcus. That was the complete list of people who'd known in the 48 hours between Vincent finding Charlotte and the package arriving at Blackwood. "I need to make some calls," he said. "I know." She sat on the living room floor next to Lily, crossed her legs, began rebuilding the small arrangement of toys the baby had already partially dismantled. "Lily and I will be here." He went into the back of the house and stood in the small study that smelled of disuse, stale air and old wood, and called Marcus at Blackwood first. Marcus confirmed. Nathan Cole had asked about the status of the Charlotte investigation 3 days ago. Standard check-in. Marcus had told him Ray had the address and was running surveillance. The following morning, the package had arrived. He sat with that for a moment. 19 years. Nathan had been the person Vincent called at midnight. The person who had told him to go to Charlotte alone, without soldiers. The advice that had felt at the time like wisdom, and now felt like something he needed to reconsider from every angle. He called Ray. "Nathan knew we had the address," he said when Ray picked up. Ray was quiet for a moment. "Yeah. You told him. He's the consigliere. He asked. I answered." Another pause. "Vincent, I've been running a secondary thought on this since the fire escape. The van was registered to an LLC that connects to Mercer, but the registration predates your investigation by 4 months. Mercer didn't spin up that shell company because he knew about Charlotte. He already had surveillance infrastructure in the Boston area. He found her independently, possibly, but the timing of the package, the photograph on your desk the morning after your first visit, that's not Mercer. That's someone in your network who knew you'd found her and wanted Mercer to know it too." Vincent closed his eyes for a moment, opened them. "Why?" "That's what I can't figure," Ray said. "Unless someone inside thinks a Mercer alliance is better than the Vega arrangement. Unless someone wanted to create a pressure point that would force your hand. The Vega arrangement, which Nathan had designed, which now suddenly served a very different strategic purpose if it collapsed under the pressure of a threat to Vincent's family. If the Callaway organization needed different allies, different arrangements, different structures. If someone who had been loyal to the Calloway name for 19 years had decided that the empire would be better served by a different heir at the top of it. Don't call Nathan, Vincent said. Don't tell him anything. Don't confirm our location. Already wasn't, Ray said, and something in his voice told Vincent he'd been running the same thread for longer than the last 5 minutes. Vincent ended the call. He stood in the dim study for a moment. Then he went back into the living room. Charlotte was sitting on the floor with Lily in her lap, both of them occupied with a soft block that made a crinkle sound when Lily squeezed it. She looked up when he came in and read something in his face and said nothing, which was one of the things about Charlotte that had always undone him, the way she knew when to wait. I have a problem inside my organization, he said. I know. You already knew. I suspected. She looked back at Lily. I told you. Information and fear. Those are the things that move in your world. Someone was afraid of something and sold information because of it. A pause. Or wanted something and used information to get it. Nathan. He said the name out loud, felt it. Charlotte was quiet for a moment. You don't know that. I'm running out of other options. Then you need to be certain before you do whatever you're thinking about doing. Her voice was careful, not soft. Charlotte was almost never soft, but measured. Because if you're wrong, you've destroyed the one relationship in your organization that has any functional loyalty left. And if you're right, she paused. If you're right, then we are considerably more exposed than I thought. From somewhere outside the house, the tree line on the north side, maybe 200 yards out, came a sound. Brief. A branch under foot weight, maybe. The kind of sound that a deer makes, that a man in a hurry makes, that the wind makes sometimes when the angle is right. All three of them heard it. Charlotte's hand moved over Lily automatically. Vincent was already at the window. The tree line was dark. The field to the south was gray and open and empty. He scanned the north and he scanned the east, and he kept very still, and 30 seconds passed and nothing moved. Then his phone rang. Unknown number. He looked at it. Charlotte looked at him, looking at it. He answered. Mr. Calloway. The voice was calm, educated, a faint mid-Atlantic effect, the kind cultivated rather than born. My name is Damian Mercer. I thought we should speak directly. We've been working through intermediaries long enough, don't you think? Vincent said nothing. Your daughter is beautiful, Mercer said. She has your eyes, that gray, quite striking. I imagine she'll be something remarkable when she grows up. A pause. Assuming she gets the opportunity. The temperature in Vincent's chest dropped several degrees and stayed there. I want to meet, Mercer said. 48 hours. I'll send you the details. I think you'll find I'm a very reasonable man when the conversation is direct and the stakes are clearly understood by all parties. If you touch them, Vincent said. His voice came out very quiet. He was surprised by how quiet it came out. I haven't touched anyone, Mercer said. My team in Boston was an introduction, a demonstration of capacity. Nothing more. I want a conversation, Mr. Calloway, not a war. Wars are expensive and they attract attention. I prefer arrangements. Another pause. Tell your wife, former wife, I should say, that the Connecticut air this time of year is good for a child's lungs. I imagine it's a relief after the city. The line went dead. Vincent stood with the phone in his hand and looked at the tree line. Mercer knew the Connecticut address, which meant the leak was not 48 hours old and isolated to the Boston surveillance. It was ongoing, active. Someone in Vincent's network was feeding Mercer information in real time, and they had been doing it long enough and with sufficient access that a clean property, 6 years old, never used for organization business, invisible to every investigator who had ever looked into the Calloway operation, was now known to the one man who was standing between Vincent and... Vincent stood at the window for a long time after the call ended. The tree line didn't move. The field stayed empty. Whatever eyes Mercer had on this property were not the kind that announced themselves. They were the patient kind, the kind that sits in the cold and watches and reports back without ever needing to be seen. Charlotte was standing behind him. He could feel it without turning around. That particular quality of her stillness, the way she stood when she was holding herself very controlled and waiting for information she already knew she wasn't going to like. He knows we're here, Vincent said. I heard. He knew before I did, before I moved you. He turned from the window. This property has never appeared in any file connected to the Callaway organization. Not in any investigation, not in any internal record. I bought it through a clean LLC under a name that has no connection to my name or my father's name or anyone who has ever worked for me. Charlotte looked at him. Then how? Because someone didn't just leak the Boston address. Someone has been inside my finances, deep inside. He set the phone down on the side table. His hand was steady. He made it be steady. The LLC is layered 4 entities deep. You'd need access to my private attorney's files to unwind it. Not the organization's attorneys, mine. Personal. Nathan handles your personal legal arrangements, Charlotte said. Not a question. Nathan handles everything. She sat down. She sat down on the edge of the couch, and she put both hands flat on her knees, and she looked at the middle distance, and she breathed. Lily was on the blanket between them, working at a soft block with the focused intensity of someone discovering that objects have edges. The room smelled of wood and cold, and the particular dusty warmth of a house that hasn't been lived in for too long. How long, Charlotte said. How long could he have been doing this? I don't know yet. Guess. Vincent sat in the chair across from her. He looked at his hands for a moment. The knuckles, the scar along the left index finger from a knife fight at 24 that he'd never told her about, the particular map of a life lived in close quarters with violence. The Vega arrangement was Nathan's idea. He pushed it hard, starting about a year ago. At the time, I thought it was strategy. The Vega ports, the judicial contacts, clean logic. He paused. If Nathan has been building a relationship with Mercer in parallel, the Vega arrangement was a way to destabilize my operation from the inside before Mercer made his approach. Weaken the structure. Remove the one person. He stopped. Remove me, Charlotte said. Flat. I was the stabilizing element, the federal judge's daughter with the clean reputation. She looked at him. My father has been your informal buffer with the Southern District for years. You know that. I know that. Nathan certainly knows that. If I'm isolated, from you, from your father's network, from the Vega Alliance, if it collapses under pressure, but I'm operating without any institutional cover. I'm exposed on every federal front simultaneously. Vincent's jaw was tight. Mercer steps in as the solution. The new alliance, the rescue. Except in Mercer's version of the arrangement, the Callaway organization doesn't survive as a separate entity. It gets absorbed. Charlotte was quiet for a moment. Nathan sells you to Mercer, and in return he gets senior position in the combined organization. Maybe more than that. Vincent stood. He couldn't sit anymore. He's 61. He's been the number 2 his entire career. My father's number 2, then mine. That's 40 years of watching someone else run the thing he built as much as anyone. He went to the window again. Force of habit. The field was still empty. I should have seen it. You trusted him. That was the mistake. No, Charlotte said, and something in her voice made him turn. She was looking at him with an expression he hadn't seen on her before. Not anger, not the carefully modulated patience she usually deployed. Something rawer than that. The mistake was building a world where trust is a vulnerability, where the person closest to you for 20 years can turn into a liability overnight because the entire structure is built on power and fear instead of anything that actually holds. She looked back at Lily. That's the mistake. Nathan is a symptom. Vincent didn't answer. He turned back to the window because it was easier than looking at her face when she said things that were entirely accurate and entirely useless to him right now. His phone buzzed. A text from Ray. Need to talk. Not on the phone. How fast can you get to Hartford? He typed back. I'm not leaving them. Ray. Then I'm coming to you, 20 minutes. It's about Nathan. Ray arrived in 19 minutes in a dark green sedan that wasn't the car he'd been driving in Boston. He'd switched vehicles somewhere on the highway, which meant he'd been thinking about being followed. He came in through the back of the property, through the field on the south side, and knocked on the kitchen door in the pattern Vincent had given him. He looked tired. Ray Suarez did not look tired easily. He sat at the kitchen table and put a manila envelope in front of Vincent and said, I pulled Nathan's financials. The secondary accounts, the ones he runs through a management company in Delaware that I've known about for 6 years but never had reason to look at closely. He paused. Mercer's been paying him since March of last year. Vincent opened the envelope. Bank records, wire transfers, a chain of transactions that had been constructed to look like consulting fees but weren't. 18 months, he said. At least. That's as far back as the records I could access go. Ray folded his hands on the table. The Vega approach came in April, 1 month after the first payment. Charlotte was standing in the kitchen doorway. She'd put Lily down in the living room with a view line to the kitchen door. Vincent could see her from where he sat, occupied with the blanket, pulling at its edge with systematic interest. Charlotte had a mug of something in her hand that she wasn't drinking. She was listening. "What else?" Vincent said. Ray reached into the envelope and pulled out a single printed page. A photograph. Surveillance quality, taken in a restaurant. A booth in the back of somewhere dim and upscale, 2 men sitting across from each other. Nathan Cole. And a man Vincent had seen in photographs but never in person. Lean, mid-40s, dark-haired, with the particular stillness of someone who is always the least agitated person in any room. Damian Mercer. "When?" Vincent said. 3 weeks ago. The restaurant is in Philadelphia. Neutral territory." Ray tapped the photograph. "My contact in the Philly field office pulled this from their surveillance file. They've been watching Mercer's movements for 8 months. This meeting wasn't flagged as significant at the time because neither party was known to be of immediate interest." He paused. "Nathan flew commercial under his own name. He wasn't hiding." "He wasn't hiding because he wasn't worried about me looking," Vincent said. "No." Charlotte set her mug on the counter. "What was discussed?" "We don't have audio, but my contact says the meeting lasted 2 hours. They left separately. The next day, Mercer's Boston infrastructure, the van, the shell company, the surveillance on your building, went active. The kitchen was quiet. From the living room, Lily made a soft sound and then went quiet again. Outside, the wind moved through the field grass with the particular sound of something being laid flat. Vincent looked at the photograph for a long time. Nathan's profile. The slope of his shoulders, the silver hair, the way he held his hands on the table. The particular posture of a man making a proposal, leaning slightly forward, calm, measured. The way he'd sat across from Vincent 1,000 times in 30 years of shared meals and shared strategy and shared silence. He put the photograph face down on the table. "I need to call him," Vincent said. "Vincent," Ray started, "not to confront him. To give him the impression that I don't know. I need him to believe he still has the advantage." He looked at Ray. "If Mercer called me directly, Nathan knows I'm unsettled. He'll expect me to call for guidance. If I don't call, he'll know something has shifted." Ray thought about it, nodded slowly. "1 call. Brief. You need something operational, something that gives him a reason to stay in place. The Vega contracts. I'll tell him I need the current draft, that I want to move the signing timeline up. Something that makes it look like I'm doubling down on the arrangement rather than pulling back." Vincent stood. "It also tells me something. If he accelerates contact with Mercer after I call, if anything moves in the next 6 hours, we'll know he's running." He picked up the phone and went into the back study. He stood in the dim room with the old wood smell and the cold seeping through the single window, and he called Nathan Cole. Nathan picked up on the second ring. "Vincent, I've been trying to reach you." "I was driving." Vincent kept his voice neutral. The particular neutral he used in negotiations, flat, unreadable, giving nothing. "Charlotte and the child are secure. I've moved them to a secondary location." "Where?" "I'd rather not say on a line, Nathan. You know how I feel about that." A brief pause. "Of course. How did the approach go?" Ray said there was an incident. "Managed. Mercer's people. Amateur-level execution." He let that sit for a second, the small lie designed to make Nathan think the operation had been less sophisticated than it was. "I need the current Vega contracts, the full draft. I want to move the signing to next week." "Next week." Nathan's voice registered something, not quite surprise. Adjustment. The sound of a man recalculating. "That's fast." "Mercer's move tells me we need the Vega alliance locked before he gets another angle. Consolidate the position." Vincent paused. "Can you get me the draft by tomorrow morning?" "Yes, of course." Another pause, fractionally too long. "Are you coming back to Blackwood?" "Not yet. I'll work from here for the next few days." I'll have Marcus send the contracts. Send them yourself, encrypted, to my private server. He wanted Nathan moving, doing something, buying the performance. I'll talk to you tomorrow. He ended the call. He stood in the study. He counted to 60, slowly, in his head. Then he went back to the kitchen. Ray had a secondary phone out, a monitoring device connected to the tap they'd placed on Nathan's communication lines 8 months ago during a routine internal security review, a tap Nathan did not know existed. It was the one precaution Vincent had taken out of old habit, rather than specific suspicion, the kind of operational hygiene his father had taught him, and that he'd maintained long past the point where he'd thought it necessary. Ray watched the screen of the monitoring device. 2 minutes passed. 3. At 4 minutes and 17 seconds, Nathan Cole made a call. The number was routed through 3 different relays, professional, well-constructed, but Ray's tech had been designed specifically to burn through relay routing. It took 40 seconds to resolve the destination number. A phone registered to a management company in Philadelphia. Damian Mercer's network. The call lasted 6 minutes. Ray recorded it and pulled the audio, and they listened to it in the kitchen of the Connecticut house, while the wind moved outside and Lily slept on the living room floor, having arranged herself sideways on the blanket in the specific way that babies sleep, with complete physical commitment. Most of it was logistics. Mercer's end of the conversation was represented only by Nathan's responses. They didn't have the other side of the line, but Nathan's side was enough. He doesn't know. He's moving toward the Vega deal, which means he's exposed on the Eastern Front. Yes, the Connecticut property. I'll have the specific address to you within the hour. The woman is manageable. She has no legal leverage without going to her father, and she won't involve him because she's been protecting the child from exposure. Yes, 48 hours. He'll take the meeting. He doesn't have a choice now. Vincent listened to it with his hands flat on the kitchen table. He listened to all 6 minutes. He listened to the voice of the man who had flown to his father's hospital room in 1987, who had stood next to him at his father's burial in the rain outside South Boston with his hand on the back of Vincent's shoulder, steady, grounding, who had walked him through his first territory negotiation and his first federal inquiry and every significant decision of his adult life. He listened to Nathan Cole give Damian Mercer the address of this house. When the recording ended, the kitchen was very quiet. Charlotte was standing in the doorway. She had come in at some point during the recording, and he hadn't noticed. She was holding the door frame with one hand. Her face was white and absolutely composed, and she was looking at him with an expression he'd never seen on her before. Not because it was an unusual expression, but because it was one she had never had reason to direct at him. It was the expression of a person watching something collapse that they had warned would collapse and had no satisfaction in being right about. "How long?" she said. "Until Mercer has the address?" Ray looked at his watch. "If Nathan moves immediately, an hour, maybe less." Charlotte turned and went into the living room. Vincent heard her pick up Lily, heard the baby's drowsy protest at being moved from the blanket, heard the automatic soft sound Charlotte made that wasn't quite a word. He stood at the kitchen table with his hand still flat on it. "We need to move again," Ray said. "We move again, and he tracks us again," Vincent said. "Nathan has been inside my financial structure for 18 months. He knows every property, every LLC, every clean address I have access to." He looked at Ray. "We can't run. We run, and we're running indefinitely with a 7-month-old and no endpoint. Then what? Then we stop running and we set the terms." Ray looked at him, waited. "Mercer wants a meeting. He said 48 hours. Vincent straightened. "We give him the meeting. We choose the location. We go in knowing what we know, and we use it. That's a significant risk. Everything from here is a significant risk." Vincent walked to the doorway and looked into the living room. Charlotte was standing with Lily against her shoulder. The baby's eyes closed again, her small hand curled against Charlotte's neck. Charlotte was looking at the front window. The pale November light came through it and fell across both of them, and the image hit him somewhere below the rib cage in a way he didn't have language for. He turned back to Ray. "There's something else," Nathan said. "The woman is manageable. She has no legal leverage without going to her father. He's wrong about that." Ray was quiet for a moment. "Judge Hayes, Charlotte's father has been an informal buffer between me and the Southern District for years. Nathan knows that. But what Nathan doesn't know is that Judge Hayes has also been building a file on organized crime in the Northeastern Corridor for the past 3 years, independent of his judicial duties, because he knew his daughter was involved with the Callaway organization and he was preparing for the day he'd need it. Vincent held Ray's eyes. Charlotte told me about the file 18 months ago, before she left. I didn't use it because I didn't want to put her father in a position, but now Mercer has made that consideration irrelevant. Vincent reached for his phone. I need to call Judge Hayes. He dialed. It rang 4 times. Then a man's voice answered, measured, careful, the voice of someone who has spent decades in rooms where every word carries weight. Vincent? Not warm, not hostile, the particular tone of a man who has been waiting for this call for longer than he wants to admit. Robert, I need to tell you where Charlotte is, and I need to tell you what's happening. He paused. And I need to ask you something I have no right to ask. A long silence. Is Charlotte safe right now? For the next hour, maybe less. Another silence. Tell me everything. He told him. All of it. The bracelet, the months of searching, the Boston apartment, the men on the fire escape, Mercer, Nathan, the recording, the Connecticut address now in Mercer's hands. He gave it to Robert Hayes in clean, unvarnished sequence, without justification and without asking for anything until he reached the end. The file you've been building, he said, the organized crime material. I need to know if there's enough in it to put a federal task force on Mercer's operation within 24 hours. Robert Hayes was silent for a long time. Outside the Connecticut house, a car had appeared on the dirt road. Distant, still, not yet moving. Ray had seen it too. He'd gone to the window and was watching it with the stillness of a man doing math. There is, Robert Hayes said finally. There has been for 6 months. I was waiting for the right moment. The right moment is now. Yes, Hayes said. I believe it is. A pause. Vincent. Yes. My daughter made her own choices. I've never agreed with all of them, but she is the most capable person I have ever known. And whatever she has decided about you, about this, I will respect it. Another pause waited. Don't make me regret this call. I'll try not to. He ended it. He looked at Ray, who was still at the window. The car, Ray said quietly. It's not moving. It's just sitting. How many? Can't tell yet. Dark windows. Vincent went to the living room. Charlotte looked at him. She read his face in that fast, comprehensive way she had. We need to go, he said. I know. She already had the duffel on her shoulder. Lily was in the carrier, strapped against her chest, awake now, looking at Vincent over Charlotte's shoulder with those gray eyes. Charlotte? He stopped. He'd been about to say something tactical, something about the car, about the route, about the next step in a sequence he was building in real time. But she was looking at him, and Lily was looking at him, and there was something in the particular quality of that double gaze, one knowing, one entirely without knowledge, that stripped the tactical language away. I'm going to fix this. I know you're going to try, she said. And then, quieter. That's new. He didn't have time to answer. Ray said from the window in a voice that had gone very flat and professional. The car just pulled forward, and there's a second one behind it on the road. Vincent turned, and through the window he saw the second car, and behind it a third, all moving now in the particular unhurried convoy of people who believe they have already won. And from somewhere at the back of the house came the sound of something. A door handle, a window latch, being tested by hands that were not Ray's, and not his, and not Charlotte's. And Lily made a single small sound against Charlotte's chest that was not fear because she was 7 months old and did not yet know what fear was. And Charlotte's hand came up over the back of the baby's head, and the sound at the back of the house stopped. That was almost worse than if it had continued. That sudden silence where there had been careful mechanical pressure. The kind of silence that means whoever was testing the door has either given up or gotten through. Ray moved first. He came away from the front window and crossed the kitchen in 4 steps and pressed himself against the wall beside the back door, weapon up, and he held there, listening. Vincent was already moving Charlotte toward the center of the house, the interior hallway, no windows, the one blind spot in whatever perimeter Mercer's people had established outside. Charlotte went without being told. She tucked her chin over Lily's head and moved, and she did not make a sound. The back door held. Whatever they'd been doing to it had stopped. "They're repositioning," Ray said quietly. "They know we're aware. They're not going to try one point of entry. They're going to try all of them simultaneously." "How many cars?" "3 on the road. Could be 4 to 6 people per vehicle if they're moving tactically. More likely 2 or 3. Ray did the math in his expression. 8 to 10, against 2. Vincent looked at Charlotte in the hallway. She had her back against the interior wall, Lily pressed between her body and the plaster, both arms around the baby, her face completely composed in a way that cost her something. He could see what it cost her, the thin line of her jaw, the controlled exhale through her nose. She was not panicking. Charlotte Hayes did not panic. What she was doing was something more precise and more exhausting than panic. She was holding herself at exactly the level of functional that kept her child calm. "There's a root cellar," Vincent said. "Under the kitchen. Old house. There's a hatch in the floor behind the refrigerator. I found it when I bought the property. Never did anything with it." Ray looked at him. "How do you get out of it?" "You don't. It's a hold point, not an exit." He looked at Charlotte. "It buys time." "How much time?" Charlotte said. "Enough for Hayes's people to move." He pulled out his phone. 1 bar of signal, fluctuating. He sent a text to the number Robert Hayes had given him at the end of their call, a direct line to the federal contact Hayes had been working with, a number that had been ready for 6 months, waiting for the right moment. His message was 4 words and the pin of their location. Now. Connecticut House. Now. He didn't know if it sent. The signal bar disappeared the moment he hit send and didn't come back. "Go," he said to Charlotte. She looked at him for exactly 1 second. Her eyes moved over his face the way they had in the doorway of her Boston apartment, that fast, comprehensive assessment. Then she moved toward the kitchen, and he went ahead of her and pulled the refrigerator out from the wall with both hands, the old appliance grinding across the linoleum, and there was the hatch. A wooden panel set flush into the floor, iron ring handle, exactly where he remembered it. He got it open. Concrete steps going down into cold darkness and the smell of earth and old wood. "There's a flashlight in the duffel," Charlotte said. She was already reaching into the bag on her shoulder, already finding it, already on. He took it from her, went down first, confirmed the space, low ceiling, earthen floor, maybe 12 feet by 8, empty except for old wooden shelving along one wall and the smell of a space that has been sealed too long. He came back up. "Give her to me," he said. Charlotte looked at him. "I'll take her down first, then you." Charlotte unclipped the carrier with practiced hands and transferred Lily into his arms before he had time to process what that meant. The specific weight of a 7-month-old, heavier than he'd expected, warmed through the fabric of her pajamas, her hands immediately going to the lapel of his jacket the way they'd gone to Charlotte's collar that first morning in Boston. She looked up at him from 6 inches away with those gray eyes, and she did not cry. He went down the steps with her. He set the flashlight on the lowest shelf, angled upward for ambient light, and he sat on the cold earthen floor with his back against the shelving and Lily in his lap, and he looked up at the hatch and waited. Charlotte came down. Ray came last, pulling the refrigerator back toward the wall from below as best he could before lowering the hatch above his head. Not perfect. The refrigerator would be 6 inches from the wall instead of flush, but in the dark, in a fast sweep of the kitchen, it might be enough. They sat in the root cellar in the thin flashlight glow, the 3 of them and Lily, listening to the house above them. For 90 seconds, nothing. Then the back door came open. Not quietly. There was a sharp sound of wood giving way. A single impact, professional entry. Boots on the kitchen floor. Multiple sets. Fast sweep pattern. He could track it by sound. The way they split and moved through the house. The short silences as they cleared rooms. The communication in low voices he couldn't make out through the floor. Lily made a small sound. Charlotte's hand came to the baby's back immediately, the automatic rhythm of it, and Lily subsided. The footsteps came back into the kitchen. Stopped. He heard the refrigerator scrape, just slightly, someone brushing against it. A pause, then moving away. They'd missed it. Ray exhaled through his nose, very quietly. Then from above them, from the front of the house, a voice, raised, carrying, "Mr. Calloway, the house is clear. You're not here, which means you're somewhere on the property. We have the perimeter covered. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to make a decision that saves your family some pain." The voice was calm. Not Mercer. Too young, too operational. A field commander. Someone who did this for a living. "You've called for federal assistance. We know that. We've been monitoring your signal." A pause. "The call didn't go through, Mr. Calloway. We have a jamming unit on site. Your message didn't reach anyone. You have 2 minutes." Vincent sat in the earthen dark with his daughter in his lap and his former wife 6 inches to his left, and he thought very carefully about what he knew and what he didn't know, and what the difference between those two things meant right now. The jamming claim might be true. It might be a tactical lie to produce surrender. He had no way to confirm which. He looked at Ray. Ray held up 2 fingers, pointed upward, shook his head once. 2 men in the kitchen. Then 3 fingers. 3 more that Ray had tracked by sound, sweeping the rest of the house. 5 total in the building. Estimated 5 to 8 more outside. He looked at Charlotte. In the thin light, her face was pale and absolutely focused. She was looking at him, and she was not asking for reassurance. She had never in her life asked him for reassurance. But she was waiting for information, the way she always waited for it, with the particular patience of a person who has learned that the quality of a decision depends entirely on the quality of what you know before you make it. He leaned close to her ear. "If I come up, they'll concentrate on me. Ray gets you and Lily out through the back." Her head turned. Her mouth was at his ear. "And then I deal with what's in the house. There are at least 5 of them." "Yes." "Vincent." Her breath was warm against the side of his face. "That's not a plan. That's a sacrifice play." "I know what it is." She pulled back far enough to look at him. Her eyes in the flashlight glow were very dark and very direct, and they held something in them he hadn't seen before or hadn't let himself see, which wasn't the same thing but felt like it right now in the cold under the earth. "No," she said. "Charlotte, no." She said it the same way she'd said everything to him that mattered, without heat, without drama, with the particular weight of a decision already made. "You don't get to do that. You don't get to show up 8 months late and spend 6 hours being someone I could have relied on and then throw yourself into 5 guns. That's not redemption, Vincent. That's just a different way of leaving." He looked at her. Something moved through him that he didn't have time for and couldn't stop. Ray touched his arm. He was holding out his phone, the secondary device, the one not connected to the Calloway network, the one Ray had bought with cash in Hartford 2 days ago, and that the jamming unit therefore had no registered signal to suppress. A single text from an unknown number. 6 words. "Asset located. Moving. 8 minutes out." Robert Hayes had gotten the message. Ray's mouth curved slightly, just slightly. "The old judge came through," he said, barely audible. 8 minutes. 8 minutes was a long time in a house with 5 armed men who were about to run out of patience. The field commander's voice came again from above. "Time's up, Mr. Calloway." Vincent handed Lily to Charlotte. He checked his weapon. Full magazine, 1 in the chamber, safety off. He looked at Ray and held up 3 fingers, pointed at the hatch, then pointed at himself and made a motion toward the front of the house. Ray understood. He'd take the kitchen, Vincent would draw toward the front. Split the concentration. Ray nodded once. Charlotte held Lily against her chest and looked at Vincent and said nothing. He looked back at her. He'd been looking at her for 7 years in one way or another, and he had never been good at it. Never been adequate to what she offered him in those moments of direct attention. And he wasn't adequate now either, but he held it because she deserved that much. Then he pushed up the hatch. He came through it fast, the refrigerator scattering sideways as he drove his shoulder into it. And he was in the kitchen and moving before the 2 men in the room had fully processed the entrance point, which was the entire advantage of it. They'd been watching the doors, not the floor. He took the first one across the jaw with the butt of his weapon, driving through the motion the way his father had taught him at 15 in a South Boston gym that smelled of sweat and old leather, putting his full weight behind it. The man went down. The second one had his weapon up, but Ray was already through the hatch behind Vincent, and the second man was hit twice in rapid succession, non-lethal, body shots. Ray was precise, and he was on the floor before he got a round off. 12 seconds. Maximum noise. Running footsteps from the front of the house, 3 of them, responding to the sound. Vincent moved to the kitchen doorway and fired twice into the ceiling of the hallway. Not at the men, at the plaster above them. And the debris and the sound stopped their approach for 3 seconds, which was enough for Ray to get Charlotte and Lily up through the hatch and out the back door. Then Vincent ran toward the front. It was not a rational decision. It was the decision of a man who has been operating on rational calculations for 20 years and has just run out of margin and is now operating on something older and less precise. He ran toward the 3 men in the front hallway because every second he ran toward them was a second Charlotte and Lily and Ray were putting distance between themselves and the house. The hallway was dark. He hit the first man at a dead run, taking them both into the wall hard enough to crack the plaster, feeling the impact through his shoulder and collarbone and not stopping, driving an elbow back into the man's sternum and then spinning to put the wall at his back before the other 2 could get an angle. The second man fired. The round took him in the left side above the hip. He felt it as impact first, a massive blunt force that sat him against the wall, and then as heat, spreading outward from a point just above his hip bone, and then as the particular awareness that something had gone through him that wasn't supposed to be there. He stayed upright. He kept the gun in his right hand and he shot the man who had shot him. And the man went down. And the third man, the field commander, he registered, the one with the carrying voice, had his weapon at Vincent's head from 4 feet away. They looked at each other. Vincent was bleeding. He could feel it, warm down his left side, soaking into his shirt. Not the sharp arterial flow that means the worst, but not nothing either. His breathing was labored. He kept the gun level at the field commander's center mass, and the field commander kept his level at Vincent's head, and neither of them moved. "You're hit," the field commander said, calm, professional, stating a fact. "Yes, that's not a survivable position without medical attention and approximately—" "How many more outside?" Vincent said. The field commander didn't answer. "I'll take that as 6. Vincent breathed through his nose. The heat in his side was intensifying in the way pain does when the initial shock begins to clear. He kept his face flat. "Your people outside have a federal task force converging on this property right now. Judge Robert Hayes has been building the Mercer file for 6 months. It goes live tonight whether I'm standing or not." He watched the field commander's face for the particular microshift that tells you when information has landed somewhere real. Which means the math on your situation changed about 3 minutes ago. Your employer is going to be arrested. The organization you work for is going to be dismantled. And you're going to be the man found standing over a shooting victim in a house that's about to have 30 federal agents walk through the door. The field commander's gun hand was steady. His eyes were not. "Or," Vincent said, "you walk out the back. Right now. You're a contractor. You leave your employer's problem to be his problem, and you disappear." He kept his own weapon up, even though his left arm was shaking slightly now, the shock moving through his system in the particular destabilizing way of a body that has taken serious damage and is beginning to report it. You have about 60 seconds to make that decision before those agents hit the perimeter and the decision gets made for you. Silence in the hallway. The old house made its sounds. Wind, wood, the creak of something settling. The field commander lowered his weapon. He walked past Vincent to the back of the house and out the back door, and Vincent heard his footsteps crossing the kitchen, and then nothing. Vincent put his back against the hallway wall and slid down it until he was sitting on the floor. He kept the gun in his hand. He looked at the ceiling. Outside from somewhere down the road, he heard it. The sound of vehicles. Multiple. Moving fast. And through the front window of the house, in the tree line to the south, he saw what the field commander had apparently also seen. The blue-white flash of federal lights, not yet visible in full, but unmistakable in their reflection off the low clouds, the particular cold light of the government arriving in numbers. His phone had signal again. 1 bar, fluctuating. He looked at the screen. The text he'd sent to Hayes' contact, the one he'd assumed hadn't gone through, showed a delivery confirmation timestamp of 3 minutes after he'd sent it. The jammer had been telling the truth about the delay, but not about the failure. The message had gone through on a delayed burst when the signal dropped. He put the phone down on his thigh. He looked at the blood on his jacket, the dark, spreading stain. He breathed in through his nose and out through his mouth, and he stayed very still. The front door came open. Charlotte. She was through it in 2 steps with Lily strapped to her chest and Ray a step behind her, and she crossed the hallway and crouched in front of him, and her hand went immediately to his side, pressing flat, and he heard the sound she made. Not a cry, not a word, something below language, when she felt the blood. Left side, he said, above the hip. I don't think it hit anything critical. You don't think, she said. Her voice was very controlled. Her hands were not shaking. She was pressing against the wound through his shirt and jacket, and her eyes were moving over his face with the particular focused assessment of someone taking inventory. I'm still here. You're still here, she repeated, and something in the repetition was not agreement, was not relief, was not anything he could categorize easily, was something more complicated and more fundamental than any of those things. Lily's hand had found his shoulder. The baby's fingers were gripping the fabric of his jacket. The same automatic grasping that Charlotte had described in the letter. In the note he'd found in the drawer, she makes a sound when she sleeps that you would have loved. Lily's hand on his jacket in the dim hallway, while he bled onto the floor, and Charlotte pressed both palms against his side. And outside the lights got brighter, and the sound of vehicles got louder, and the house around them held. Federal agents. Ray's voice from the doorway, low and even. Coming through the perimeter. Mercer's people are scattering. I can see 3 vehicles trying to leave the road. They're not going to make it. Charlotte's eyes stayed on Vincent's face. You need a hospital. I know. Right now. I know, Charlotte. Then stop looking at me like that and tell me you can stand up. He looked at her for one more second. He looked at Lily's hand on his jacket. He looked at Charlotte's hands on his side, steady, deliberate. The hands of a woman who has been keeping things alive by willpower since long before he gave her reason to need to. I can stand up, he said. He wasn't entirely sure that was true. He was going to find out. He shifted his weight, and Charlotte got her shoulder under his right arm, and Ray came to his left, and together they got him upright, and he stood in the hallway of the Connecticut house with the federal lights coming through every window now, and his blood on the floor, and his daughter's hand still somehow finding the fabric of his jacket. And he thought, this is what it costs. Not the wound, not the empire, not the 19 years of Nathan Cole or the Vega Alliance or any piece of the structure he'd spent his adult life constructing. This. Standing in a hallway with a bullet hole in his side and the 2 people he'd failed most catastrophically in his life, holding him up because they'd chosen to. The front door opened and the first federal agent came through it, and Vincent was still standing when they took him out on a stretcher. He didn't want the stretcher. He said so once, and the paramedic, a young woman with short hair, and the particular no-nonsense efficiency of someone who has dealt with too many men who don't want the stretcher, looked at him without expression and said, Sir, you've lost approximately 800 milliliters of blood, and your blood pressure is 84/60. You can want whatever you like. And that was the end of that conversation. Charlotte walked beside the stretcher to the ambulance. She had Lily on her hip, and she kept pace without effort, looking down at him with that unreadable expression she'd been wearing since she found him on the hallway floor. Ray had handed her a blanket somewhere, so she'd wrapped it around herself and the baby against the November cold, and she walked through the blue-white wash of the federal lights, with her chin up and her jaw set, and her free hand resting on the stretcher rail, not holding his hand, just present, maintaining contact with the thing rather than the person, which was Charlotte's way of doing most things, and which he understood better than he ever had. You don't have to ride with me, he said. I know I don't have to. Charlotte, stop talking. She glanced at the paramedic. Can he talk, or does talking make it worse? Talking is fine, the paramedic said. Being difficult is what makes it worse. Charlotte looked back at him. You heard her. He closed his eyes. The stretcher lifted and the ambulance doors came, and the last thing he saw before they loaded him was the tree line to the south, still dark, and the 3 federal vehicles angled across the dirt road, and Ray standing with 2 agents in the flashing light, hands in his pockets, talking with the specific, deliberate ease of a man who has dealt with law enforcement before and is choosing his words with care. Then the doors closed, and the ambulance moved. The surgery took 3 hours. The round had entered above his left hip, missed the iliac artery by 11 millimeters. The surgeon told him this afterward with the tone of a man imparting information he considers both medically significant and personally irritating, and exited through the lateral muscle, causing substantial tissue damage and blood loss without perforating the abdominal cavity. He would heal. It would take time and be unpleasant, and he would need to be careful in ways that would frustrate him. Charlotte was in the waiting room when they brought him out of recovery. She was sitting in a chair with Lily asleep in her arms. The baby's full weight surrendered to sleep the way only infants can surrender it, completely, without reservation. Charlotte was not asleep. She was sitting straight in the plastic hospital chair with her eyes open and her head against the wall, and she was looking at the ceiling with the expression of a woman who has been sitting with her own thoughts for 3 hours and has arrived somewhere she's not going to describe to anyone right away. She looked at him when the orderly wheeled him through. She said nothing. He said nothing. Lily slept. They brought him to a room, and Charlotte followed and sat in the chair beside the bed, and they stayed like that in the particular medicinal quiet of a hospital at 2 in the morning, the only sound the equipment, the distant corridor, Lily's breathing. "Nathan," he said. His voice came out rougher than he intended. The anesthesia, the hours. "Arrested," Charlotte said. "Ray texted me during your surgery. Federal agents picked him up at Blackwood at 11:15. He didn't resist." A pause. "Ray said he looked—" She stopped. "What?" Ray said he looked relieved. She said it carefully, the way you say something you're still processing. "I don't know what to do with that." Vincent thought about Nathan in the restaurant in Philadelphia. Nathan across the table from Damian Mercer, calm, measured, making a proposal. And then Nathan in every room before that. Every strategy session, every crisis, every early morning phone call for 19 years. A man doing two things simultaneously for 18 months, maintaining both with such precision that neither showed in the other. That was a particular kind of exhaustion. That was the weight of a sustained performance. And when the performance ended, relief was not an irrational response. It did not make it better. It made it, in some ways, worse. The idea that Nathan had carried the betrayal long enough to be tired of it. "Mercer," he said, "detained at his Philadelphia office at midnight. Robert, my father, coordinated with the task force directly." She paused. "They've been building toward this for 6 months. They had enough for a RICO charge before tonight. Tonight just made it airtight." Her voice was careful and neutral, and underneath it was something that was not neutral, something he recognized as the specific emotion of a person whose parent has come through for them in a way they weren't certain would happen. Robert Hayes, building his file for 6 months, waiting for the right moment, protecting his daughter from a distance, the only way he'd had access to. "I need to call your father," Vincent said. "Not tonight." "Charlotte, not tonight, Vincent." She looked at him directly. "He knows you're alive. I called him from the waiting room. That's enough for tonight." He was quiet for a moment. Lily shifted in Charlotte's arms, resettling without waking, the small internal adjustments of a sleeping infant. Charlotte's hand moved over the baby's back, the automatic rhythm. "The Vega arrangement," Vincent said. "What about it?" "It's finished. Nathan was the architect, and Nathan was working against it. Marco Vega's people will have been notified by now that the Callaway contact was compromised. They'll pull back." He looked at the ceiling. "The whole Eastern Alliance structure is gone." "Yes," Charlotte said. "The organization is exposed on every front. Without the Vega cover, without Nathan managing the institutional relationships, without—" He stopped. "I spent 20 years building something that was held together by one man I trusted completely, and one marriage I handled badly, and both of those things are gone." Charlotte was quiet for a moment. "What are you going to do?" He'd been sitting with the question for 3 hours on an operating table with his eyes closed and the anesthesia doing its work, and the answer had come to him not as a decision, but as a recognition. The way certain truths arrive, not invented but found, already present, waiting for the noise to clear. "Dissolve it," he said. Charlotte's head turned. "The criminal operations, all of it." He said it to the ceiling because saying it to the ceiling was easier than saying it to her face while he meant it. "There are legitimate businesses inside the Callaway structure. Real estate holdings, 3 food distribution companies, a logistics operation out of Jersey. Clean. Actually clean, not paper clean. I've kept them separate out of habit. They can stand on their own." He paused. "The rest of it gets dismantled, voluntarily, before the federal investigation moves in that direction, which it will, and on terms I control rather than terms imposed." The room was very quiet. That's not a small thing, Charlotte said. No. It's everything you've built. It's everything my father built, and I inherited and extended and protected at the cost of... He stopped. Started again. It's not everything. It's the part that cost everything else. Charlotte looked at him for a long time. Lily made a small sound in her sleep, a brief complaint about nothing, and settled again. Charlotte's hand continued its rhythm. I don't forgive you, she said. I want to be clear about that. What you did, the way you told me to leave, the way you handled it, there's no version of tonight that erases that. I know. You can't buy it back with a grand gesture. I know that too. Then why? She looked at him. Why dissolve it? If it's not for forgiveness and it's not for me, why? He turned his head on the pillow, so he was looking at her, at Lily asleep in her arms, at the particular composition of them together, the woman who had walked away from everything he'd offered and built something real and careful from nothing, and the child who had arrived in the world without his knowledge and grown for 7 months into a person with gray eyes and a grip that knew what it wanted. Because she'll ask me someday, he said. Lily. She'll be old enough to ask, and she'll ask, and I need to have an answer that isn't the same answer my father would have given, which is the same answer I would have given a year ago. He held Charlotte's gaze. I need the answer to be something I actually did, not something I meant to do or almost did or was working toward. Charlotte looked at him without speaking for a long moment. Then she looked down at the baby. Something moved through her face. Not softening, not resolution. Something more honest than either of those things. Something that acknowledged the distance still between them without pretending it wasn't there. Okay, she said, quiet, flat. The single word that was not agreement or forgiveness or any kind of promise, but was the specific word Charlotte Hayes used when she had decided to wait and see. He understood that word. He closed his eyes. The next weeks were the slowest of his life and the loudest. The federal investigation into the Mercer organization moved fast. Robert Hayes's file, 6 months in the building, was as comprehensive as he'd implied, and the arrests came in waves through November and into December. Damian Mercer was indicted on 16 counts, including racketeering, conspiracy, and 3 charges directly related to the Connecticut operation. His attorneys were good, and the process would be long, but the structure was gone. The organization that had built surveillance infrastructure in Boston and sent men up a fire escape and put a bullet in Vincent's left side was being dismantled piece by piece in federal courtrooms, and Vincent was not required to do anything except heal and occasionally speak to the federal attorney who was managing the adjacent Callaway inquiry with the particular careful neutrality of someone who has been offered a great deal of cooperation and is trying to decide how much to accept. Nathan Cole entered a guilty plea in mid-December. He was 61 years old and had been in the Callaway organization for 40 years, and his attorneys argued for leniency on the grounds of his age and his eventual cooperation with the federal investigation. Cooperation that, his attorneys were careful to note, had predated his arrest. Had predated it, Vincent learned through his own attorney, by approximately 6 weeks. Nathan had been talking to the Southern District since October. He'd been playing 3 sides simultaneously: Mercer, Vincent, and the federal government, with the same sustained precision he'd applied to everything for 40 years. Vincent sat with that information for a week before he could look at it clearly enough to understand what it meant. It meant Nathan had been hedging. It meant that somewhere in the 18 months of his arrangement with Mercer, something had shifted. Not conscience exactly. Nathan Cole was not a man of sudden conscience, but calculation. Mercer's operation had begun to show cracks. The federal pressure on organized crime in the Northeast had intensified in ways that changed the math. Nathan, who had spent 4 decades reading organizational structures and their vulnerabilities, had read his own situation and identified the exit before the walls came down. He'd still burned Vincent to do it. He'd still given Mercer the Connecticut address and orchestrated the pressure campaign that had put Charlotte and Lily in a root cellar and put a bullet in Vincent's side. The federal cooperation hadn't stopped any of that. It had just ensured Nathan's own survival once it was over. Vincent understood the logic completely. That was the part that took the week to sit with, not the betrayal, which was comprehensible and almost clean in its professional consistency, but the recognition that he had built the kind of world in which this logic was not only possible, but rational. A world in which a man who had stood at your father's burial with his hand on your shoulder could spend 18 months dismantling everything you'd built and feel, at the end of it, relieved. He visited Nathan once in the federal holding facility in Manhattan 3 weeks after the surgery. He went alone. He sat across the table from the silver-haired man who had been his father's advisor before he was his own, and he looked at him, and for a long time neither of them said anything. "Why Mercer?" Vincent said finally. Nathan looked older in the holding facility. Not by years, by something more specific than years, by the weight of a sustained performance that had ended. He approached me directly, 2 years ago, before I came to you with the Vega idea. He held Vincent's gaze. The directness was unchanged. Whatever else Nathan had become, he had always been direct, and he was direct now. He offered a position, senior operational, real authority, not— He stopped. "Not what you had with me," Vincent said. "Not what I had with you," Nathan confirmed. Flat. Honest. "I've been the number 2 for 40 years, your father's number 2, then yours. I built the structure you've been running. I designed the Eastern Alliance strategy, the judicial relationships, the legitimate business integration, all of it." He paused. "I've watched 2 men run what I built. And you wanted it for yourself. I wanted to have built something that was mine." Nathan's voice was very quiet. "That's different." Vincent looked at him. He thought about that. He thought about 40 years of standing behind someone else's name, executing someone else's vision with your own intelligence, your own strategy, your own labor. He thought about what that costs over 40 years. He did not excuse it, but he thought about it. "The file you built for the Southern District," Vincent said. "How long?" 18 months, parallel to the Mercer arrangement." A pause. "I knew Mercer was going to implode eventually. His financial structure was unsustainable, and he was expanding too fast into territories he didn't have the depth to hold. I needed an exit that didn't end with me in federal prison for the rest of my life." He looked at Vincent. "The cooperation agreement gives me 7 years, minimum security." 7 years, Vincent said. "Yes. You burned 20 years of my life, put my daughter in a root cellar, and shot me for 7 years. Nathan held his gaze. "I didn't pull the trigger." "Don't." Vincent's voice came out very quiet. "Don't do that." Nathan was silent. Vincent stood. He straightened his jacket. He looked at the man across the table one more time, not with hatred, which would have been easier, but with something more complicated and more permanent. The look of a person cataloging a loss and deciding what to do with it. "I hope 7 years gives you what 40 didn't," he said. He walked out. Christmas came to the Connecticut house. Vincent had bought the place outright under Charlotte's name, transferred clean, 3 weeks after the surgery. He'd done it through his personal attorney without announcement, and Charlotte had called him when the paperwork arrived and said, "You didn't have to do this." And he'd said, "I know." And she'd said, "It doesn't change anything." And he'd said, "I know that too." And there had been a silence, and then she'd said, "Come for Christmas. Lily's starting to pull herself up on the furniture, and you should see it." He came. He slept in the back bedroom, which Charlotte had furnished with the specific practicality she brought to every space. Nothing excessive, nothing decorative for its own sake. A bed and a lamp and a bookshelf that held 3 novels and a manual on child development and the framed beach photograph of herself and Emma that she'd taken from the South End apartment. Emma had come for 2 days before Christmas and had sat across from Vincent at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee and the same expression she'd had the 2 times he'd met her before, the considered assessment of someone who has filed a comprehensive opinion and is waiting to see if the evidence warrants revision. On the second morning, she'd said, "She doesn't need protecting from you. She never needed protecting from you specifically. She needed protecting from what you represented." A pause. "Those aren't the same thing, and it matters that you understand the difference." "I'm trying to," he said. Emma had looked at him for a moment, then she'd picked up her coffee. "She'll tell you when you've got it right," she said. And that was all she said about it. Robert Hayes came on Christmas Eve. He drove himself from Connecticut. He'd retired from the bench in November, citing the conflict of interest that had become unavoidable once his federal cooperation became public record. and he seemed to have absorbed this consequence with the same measured acceptance he applied to most things. He was a tall man, Charlotte's height in the cheekbones and the particular set of the jaw, and he shook Vincent's hand at the door and held it for a moment longer than a handshake requires. "I didn't do it for you," he said. "Not unkind, just precise." "I know," Vincent said. "Thank you anyway." Hayes looked at him for a moment. Then he went inside to his daughter and his granddaughter, and Vincent stepped back and let him. The dissolution of the Callaway criminal operations took 4 months, managed by Vincent's personal attorneys and coordinated with the Southern District under a cooperation framework that gave federal prosecutors access to organizational records in exchange for limited immunity protections for low-level members who had no meaningful alternative to participation. It was not a clean process. Clean processes did not exist at this scale. People were charged who Vincent had worked to protect. People walked away who perhaps should not have. The law's idea of justice and the full truth of 2 decades of organized crime were not perfectly congruent, and living with that incongruence was part of the cost. The 3 legitimate businesses, the real estate holding company, the food distribution operations, the logistics firm, were restructured under a new corporate entity. Vincent took a minority operational role and brought in outside management, people without history in the organization. 2 of the distribution companies began working with food security nonprofits in New York and Boston, not as marketing, as actual operational partnerships, directing product to communities that needed it. It was Ray's idea originally. Ray, who had stayed on as head of the legitimate operations security division, and who turned out to have thoughts about what the Callaway name could mean without the weight of what it had meant, thoughts he'd apparently been sitting on for 11 years waiting for someone to ask. Vincent asked, eventually. About a lot of things. He'd gotten better at asking. Lily started walking in March. She was 10 months old, and she did it the way she did everything, with complete physical commitment and zero interest in the possibility of failure, pulling herself upright on the edge of the coffee table, and then simply releasing and moving forward as if the floor's job was to be there and her job was to cross it. She crossed 4 feet of living room floor and reached the couch and grabbed it and turned and looked at the room with an expression of profound, impartial satisfaction. Vincent was sitting in the chair 6 feet away. He'd been there for 2 hours, waiting, because Charlotte had called him that morning and said Lily had been standing unsupported for 20 seconds at a stretch, and something was about to happen, and he'd driven from New York in 3 hours flat. Lily looked at him after she grabbed the couch. Those gray eyes, which remained exactly as they'd looked at him in the hallway in Boston 8 months ago, empirical, direct, entirely unimpressed by what they found and entirely interested in it. "Hi," he said, quietly. The same word he'd said the first time. Lily made a sound that was not quite a word but was reaching toward one, an open vowel, bright, directed at him with the force of a person who has been working on communication for months and knows who she's communicating with. Charlotte was standing in the kitchen doorway. He didn't look at her immediately. He let the moment exist as its own thing. But he was aware of her, the way he was always aware of her when she was in the room, the specific quality of her presence that had not diminished in 7 years and showed no signs of doing so. When he looked, she was watching Lily with an expression he didn't have to interpret. It was the expression of a woman who has kept something alive through enormous effort and is watching it exceed everything she protected it for. She looked at him a moment later, caught him looking. "She practiced on the furniture all morning," Charlotte said. "She's been planning this." "I know. She has your approach to things." Charlotte's expression shifted. Slight, guarded, but there. "She has your stubbornness." "That too." Lily, uninterested in this exchange, released the couch and walked 3 more steps toward the center of the room with that same unhesitating commitment before sitting down hard on the floor and regarding the situation with calm reassessment. Then she looked up at Vincent and made the sound again. That open vowel, that reaching gesture toward a word she was building. He got out of the chair. He sat on the floor 4 feet from her, which put them at approximately the same level. She studied him for a moment. Then she crawled the remaining distance and grabbed his sleeve, which was apparently what she'd wanted, and settled against his knee and turned outward to look at the room with the proprietary satisfaction of someone who has gotten exactly where they intended. He looked at Charlotte. She was in the kitchen doorway with her arms crossed and her shoulder against the frame, and she was looking at him with an expression that he had not seen on her face before. Not the assessment, not the careful measured neutrality, not the guarded patience of a woman maintaining the appropriate distance from someone who had not yet earned anything less. Something older than those things. Something that admitted, without words and without concession, that the distance had changed. Not gone. Changed. She didn't say anything. He didn't say anything. Lily had found a loose thread on his jacket cuff and was investigating it with both hands and her full attention. There were things still to be resolved. There would be for a long time. The federal processes moved slowly, and the organizational dissolution moved slowly, and the particular process of two people rebuilding something from wreckage moved slowest of all. Charlotte had her own attorneys, her own counsel, her own deliberate pace of decision-making about what the future looked like and how he fit into it, or didn't. She'd gone back to her public health consulting work full-time in January, taking Lily to a woman named Patricia 3 days a week, a retired nurse in Simsbury who had the specific calm authority of someone who has cared for a great many children and regards each new one as a perfectly manageable situation. Charlotte paid Patricia herself. She had not asked Vincent for money, and he had not offered it without being asked, because that was one of the things he had finally understood. He called. He showed up when she said to show up. He took Lily on Sunday afternoons to a park in Simsbury, where there was a small playground with a sandbox that Lily regarded as a serious professional resource. He and Charlotte talked on those Sunday afternoons. About Lily, at first, and then about other things, gradually. The way you start using a healed joint again, carefully, testing the range of motion before committing to full weight. They talked about her work, his restructuring, the legal proceedings. They talked about Emma's new position at a hospital in Boston. They talked about a book Charlotte had read that she thought he would argue with, and he read it and argued with her, and she argued back. And somewhere in the middle of that argument about a book on Tuesday evening on the phone, he realized that he was talking to her the way he'd talked to her before they were married, and before any of it went wrong, before the empire and the fear and the years of handled badly, and that she was talking to him the same way. He mentioned it. He was aware even as he did that mentioning it was a risk. "I know," she said. Not soft, not cool, just honest. "Is that—" He stopped. "Is that something?" A pause. A long one. He waded through it, which was also something new. "It's something," she said. "I don't know what yet." "Okay? Don't push." "I'm not pushing. You're extremely not pushing right now," she said, and there was something in her voice that was the closest thing to lightness she'd allowed herself in his direction, brief as it was, before the careful neutrality came back. He let her have the neutrality. He'd learned to leave things the space they needed. The following summer, Lily turned 1. Charlotte organized a small gathering. Emma, Robert Hayes, Ray and his wife, Patricia from Simsbury, a neighbor Charlotte had become friendly with over the winter. No one from the old organization. That world had its own ending, and this one was starting from different materials. Vincent brought a cake. He'd made it himself, badly, from a recipe he'd found online and executed with the particular grim determination of someone approaching an unfamiliar task as a problem to be solved through effort. It was lopsided. The icing was uneven. Charlotte looked at it when he carried it through the door and said nothing for a moment, and then said, "Did you make that?" "Yes." "It looks like it survived something." "It did. There was an incident with the timer." She looked at him. The corner of her mouth moved. Just slightly, just enough. "It's fine," she said. "She's going to put her whole hand in it anyway." She did. Lily assessed the cake from a distance of approximately 8 inches, reached out with both hands, and revised its structural integrity completely, without apology. The room laughed. Charlotte laughed. A real laugh, bright and brief. The laugh he'd heard exactly 3 times in 7 years because it was the one she couldn't manage. The involuntary one. The one she made when something caught her entirely off guard. He didn't say anything about it. He stood in the kitchen of the Connecticut house that was now Charlotte's house, in the summer afternoon coming through the windows, and he watched Lily systematically redistribute the cake, and he watched Robert Hayes laughing at something Emma had said, and he watched Ray's wife take a photograph of the whole scene with her phone, and he thought about a note in a white envelope, about pink beads on a thin cord, about a man sitting on the edge of his desk at 11:43 at night, reading 7 lines in his wife's handwriting and understanding for the first time what he'd lost. He thought about the distance between that night and this afternoon, and everything the distance had cost, and everything it had produced. Charlotte came to stand beside him, not close, the appropriate distance, the distance she maintained, but beside him, looking at the room. "She's going to need a bath," Charlotte said. "Yes. She has cake in places cake shouldn't be able to reach. She's thorough." Charlotte was quiet for a moment. Then, very quietly, not looking at him, "You didn't have to make the cake." "I know. It's a terrible cake." "I know that too." She was quiet again. He stayed in the quiet with her, which was something he'd gotten better at. Staying in the quiet without filling it, without managing it, without trying to turn it into something it wasn't ready to be. "She's going to ask," Charlotte said. Still quiet, still not looking at him. "Eventually, when she's old enough, she's going to ask why." "I know." "What are you going to tell her?" He thought about it. He thought about it seriously, the way he'd been thinking about it for months, since the night in the Connecticut hallway, when he'd sat on the floor bleeding and understood what the question would cost him when it came. "That I made every wrong choice a person can make," he said, "and that your mother was the one who protected you from those choices until I could learn to make different ones." He paused. "And that the difference between who I was and who I'm trying to be is her. That she's the reason the trying is worth anything." Charlotte was still for a long time. The room around them was warm and loud with the ordinary noise of a child's birthday, the kind of noise that means nothing is wrong, nothing is being managed. Everyone in the room is exactly where they chose to be. Then Charlotte's hand moved. It moved the short distance between them and found his hand, and she held it. Not with pressure, not with declaration, just held it. Her fingers around his, the specific weight of a person deciding to remain present. She didn't look at him. He didn't say anything. Lily looked up from the wreckage of the cake and found them both standing there and made a sound of enormous satisfaction directed at nothing in particular, or possibly at everything, which amounted to the same thing. Outside, the summer afternoon laid itself across the Connecticut field, and the tree line and the dirt road, and the light on all of it was long and unhurried in the way that light gets at the end of a day that has gone on long enough to mean something. And inside the house, the voices of the people Charlotte had chosen to keep were filling the rooms she'd built for herself from nothing, and Vincent Calloway stood in the middle of it with her hand in his and let the day be what it was. He didn't hold on too tight. He was learning.